A while back, I did a video where I suggested the tone Zack Snyder used in the DC Extended Universe could have worked if he kinda did the Crime Syndicate or the Justice Lords, with their motivations tweaked slightly. So here's a sequel to that video. This time, I won't be sticking to the same release order we had in real life. Our next movie would be Flash. This isn't a morally gray or evil version of the Flash, just a regular kid in over his head who can run really fast. Even in a normal DC universe, I don't know how you would do a Flash movie, and I don't think the people making the movie know how to do it either. Heyo! The weird thing about Flash is he is powerful enough to bend time itself, and most of the time, no pun intended, he wastes his time with guys who throw boomerangs. He's one of the most powerful people on the planet, but he's scared of what he can do. Best case scenario, he runs so fast he gets stranded in another time period or another dimension. Worst case scenario, he taps into some cosmic force that connects all life as we know it, and he drains it and kills everyone. Then there's the other stuff that's stressing him out. The government asked him to join these guys to defend the planet. They succeeded, and now the government wants him to stick around and keep an eye on the people who might want to take over the world. On top of his alliance with the Syndicate, Barry is doing small favors for Amanda Waller on the side. The Syndicate hasn't immediately jumped into the White House and taken over after they ran Darkseid's forces away. They have a very tentative relationship with Waller and the rest of the US government. Yes, Waller has made a few attempts on Ultraman's life by this point, but Owlman has convinced Ultraman it would be better to keep the establishment intact, to let them continue running things the way they have been, while they slowly integrate themselves into the system and figure out a way they can take control without everything falling apart. The Syndicate is working with the US government to rebuild after the invasion, but tensions are high. While Congress is saying, we don't have the funds to support these displaced victims, Ultraman says, maybe you do have those funds, okay? Waller tells Barry, there's this guy with a freeze gun, can you go take him in? Those are the easy missions Flash has no problem with. But then she asks him to disarm an entire army in Karak. He's uncomfortable with that. Wouldn't my talents fit better with reconstruction in the wake of the invasion? But she convinces him these missions are just as important as the ones where he has to stop a supervillain. Owlman knows about Barry double-timing the Syndicate, but hasn't said anything. He needs an ace up his sleeve in case Ultraman betrays them, and if he tattles on Barry, he loses what could be his best weapon against an out-of-control Ultraman. And Ultraman also knows about what Barry is doing, but hasn't said anything because he sees that Barry is doing good work, even if he's doing it with Waller, who Ultraman does not trust for obvious reasons. If anyone's wondering what happened to Green Lantern after Hal Jordan got the ring near the end of the Justice League movie, he's in space. Things are not looking good after Darkseid's forces were defeated on Earth. Evil Space Tyrant defeated, that's good, but now Darkseid's lost the respect of all of his underlings, so his whole kingdom has fallen apart. Granny Goodness, Desad, Vermin Vunderbar, Calabac, they're all at war with each other, and that's keeping the Green Lantern Corps busy right now. We won't find out about that for a while, but just letting you know that's what's going on in the rest of the universe. Barry spends his free time in Central City, where he's become an icon for his help in cleaning up in the invasion aftermath. This is where he meets Iris West, who interviews him for his part in the cleanup, and he will meet her nephew Wally, who has also been helping in the cleanup effort. This is where Barry feels the most relaxed and at peace, because he isn't questioning what he's doing, like he is when he's with the Syndicate or when he's doing some secret mission for Amanda Waller. We find out Waller is screwing with Flash. Most of the supervillains she sent him to capture are her own operatives. She's testing the limits of Flash's abilities, and she's got this super genius, the Thinker, who's figured out how Flash's abilities work. Waller wants to recreate these abilities in someone who is more eager to follow her orders. Enter Hunter Zolomon. In the comics, he's an FBI agent, so it's not that far-fetched that he would be working with Waller. He's already a little unhinged because most of his friends and family died in the invasion from Apocalypse. When Thinker recreates the circumstances that gave Barry his powers for Zolomon, Zolomon thinks he can go back in time and stop all the horrible stuff from happening, warn everyone Darkseid is coming, put a stop to the looming threat of Ultraman. He can fix everything. Waller realizes she's created a monster, and if Zolomon could do what he says, what would stop him from continuing down that path? Maybe Zolomon would become the next Ultraman, using his power however he sees fit. Even though Barry is hesitant to do what Waller feels needs to be done for the safety of the world, he's a much better choice to have these abilities than Zolomon. Barry eventually chases Zolomon through time and space, and he believes the threat is taken care of, but we can leave it just vague enough for if we want him to return in a later movie. Speaking of vague, Barry does not come back to his own time. Either he can't or he doesn't want to because he's stressed out about everything he has to deal with, so he decides to stay wherever his race against Zolomon led him. But Barry and Zolomon breaking the time barrier has unleashed some kind of superpower wave or something, kinda like the particle accelerator in the CW shows. This will be where Walstifer West gets his super speed. Next would be a solo Owlman movie. In some alternate universe, the Batman was going to star Ben Affleck and feature Joe Manganiello as Deathstroke, and was projected to come out in 2018, so we're gonna do something kinda like that here. With the disappearance of the Flash, nobody in the Syndicate is sure what happened to him. Amanda Waller swears up and down she had nothing to do with him vanishing, but she isn't talking about her team trying to create their own version of the Flash, which led to Barry's disappearance. What's left of the Syndicate is even more distrustful of their contacts in the US government. Ultraman Ultraman and Diana are ready to topple everything and take over, but Owlman is barely able to convince them to let him investigate what's going on before they do anything rash. Owlman was viciously combating injustice within the system just like Ultraman was, but he knows none of them have the experience or the capability to run a country, even with their powers and resources. Owlman would rather root out the corruption, but keep the infrastructure intact. Owlman's been looking into Waller, but has found nothing. Then he gets a message telling him the answers he's looking for are in Arkham Asylum. Owlman isn't sure what this could be. Maybe someone has dirt on Waller and she arranged to have them put away where they couldn't talk. Since he has no other leads, he breaks into Arkham to look for answers. Unfortunately, it's a trap. Someone found out Owlman was looking where they didn't want him looking, so they hired mercenary Slade Wilson to take care of him before he finds what he's looking for. In the regular DC universe, Slade is basically a darker version of Captain America. He was a soldier, he got injured, he didn't want to spend the rest of his career behind a desk, he went through an experimental procedure that enhanced him, he eventually became a mercenary, and became an enemy to the Teen Titans when his son took a contract to kill them and died before he could complete it. Since this is a mirror universe, this version of Slade is still a soldier who went through the enhancement procedure, but instead of becoming a mercenary, he stayed with the army. His superiors played on his patriotism and would feed him missions he probably wouldn't have taken if he knew the full truth, like Owlman. Slade is told Owlman is a danger to the country and might even be trying to take over the country with his allies. From a certain point of view, this might be true. What Slade doesn't know is that Owlman is the voice of reason in the Syndicate, and Owlman encountering a trap in his search for what happened to his teammate, that only confirms in his mind that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. In the normal DC universe, there have been hints of corruption at Arkham. Since this is an alternate universe, let's lean all the way into that. People who should have gone to Blackgate are inexplicably sent to Arkham. People who should never be released from Arkham get parole far too often. It's a nightmare. This was one of Owlman's targets he was focused on before he met Ultraman, and together they set their sights on fixing the rest of the country. This would be a version of the Batman trapped in Arkham Asylum story. When Slade cannot defeat Owlman in hand-to-hand combat, he goes to his backup plan. Free all the prisoners, many of whom don't like Owlman, as his fascist Iron Fist is likely what landed a few of them in here in the first place. The rest of the movie is Owlman trying to escape. I don't know which of Batman's normal rogues you would see in here, since this is still very early in Owlman's career, and this being a mirror universe, I'm not sure which ones would still be bad guys in this world. I'd have Owlman take out one of Slade's eyes so he can make a quick escape, providing a good reason these two will cross blades in the future. Owlman sneaks into Waller's office, ready to kill her and end her threat to him and his allies. This version of Bruce, he's not as squeaky clean as the normal Batman, so if you push his buttons hard enough, he might pull the trigger, but he won't resort to that all the time. He's about to kill Waller, but she tells him she had nothing to do with his near death at Arkham. Owlman realizes she's telling the truth. Someone wanted to eliminate Owlman, and Waller isn't happy that she's in the dark about this. While Waller isn't a fan of the Syndicate, she thinks whoever was behind this could be a threat as well. Owlman and Waller reluctantly restore their alliance as they have bigger fish to fry than each other. Speaking of fish, our next film is Aquaman. Unlike the DCEU, where Aquaman grew up on the surface and is essentially an outsider to his own people, this version of Aquaman grew up in Atlantis and barely knows his father's people. In the aftermath of the invasion from Apokolips, Atlantis has made its presence known to the world, trying to set up alliances with the surface dwellers. They see this as beneficial for both sides. The Atlanteans just witnessed firsthand how impressive humanity is, that they repelled significantly more powerful enemies in the Justice League movie, and the Atlanteans are cocky enough to think the humans might be interested in their technology to help rebuild and be ready for future attacks. There will be some ceremony where Queen Atalanta is meeting and greeting surface world politicians with some of her honor guard, like Volko and Calderam and her son, Prince Orm. There's an attack by an unknown assailant, and Queen Atalanta is killed. Despite the tragedy and chaos, Orm steps up and takes charge, not allowing this to sully the alliance his mother wanted. Orm assures the surface dwellers he does not hold them responsible for this attack, but he must return home to handle this properly. This is where Orm's half-brother Arthur comes in. Being only half Atlantean, Arthur is the shame of the royal family. If an Atlantean had a tryst with a human, the child is essentially kidnapped from human civilization and raised as Atlantean. This is more common than the Atlanteans like to admit, but when Atalanta turned up with a half-human child before she took the throne, that was quite the scandal. It was agreed Arthur would not ascend to the throne, even though he was Atalanta's firstborn. But other than becoming the crown prince, his options were wide open to him, so he chose to join the Atlantean military, where he rose in the ranks. This is partly because of his natural talent at soldiery, but also being the queen's son, that does open doors for him. So even though he's an embarrassment to the royal family, he's done well for himself. Orm comes to Arthur and wants him to look into who did this. Orm is sincere about continuing the political alliance their mother was going for, but he's not going to sit by and let this happen unpunished. You might have thought Orm orchestrated the attack so he could take the throne, but nope, he's innocent. It was actually Volko, Atalanta's head of security and military advisor. In the New 52 Aquaman comics, Volko betrayed Arthur for what he felt was the safety of Atlantis, so we'll be doing that here. He isn't too keen on Atlantis moving onto the world stage, and he he thought with Atalanta out of the way, he could manipulate the young and inexperienced Orm into backing away from what Atalanta was going for. But even though Orm may have had disagreements with his mom about how she ran things, he still wants to honor her, so Volko misjudged a little bit there. Arthur's investigations take him to the same shadowy organization that hired Slade Wilson to take out Owlman. Volko found out about this group and convinced them that it would be in their best interest if Atalanta did not succeed. Whoever these guys are, they have an investment in the United States government, it seems, since they were trying to keep Owlman from digging around there, and they also don't want Atlantis complicating matters either. Working for this organization is Black Manta, a freelance operative who has done some missions for them over the years, but currently has his own interests. Years ago, Black Manta also had a son with an Atlantean, and she took the child with her back to Atlantis, and he never saw him again, until the televised ceremony where Atalanta was attacked. If you've seen the Young Justice animated series, you know where I'm going with this. Black Manta's son is Calderon, Aqualad in Young Justice. Calderon was sent with Arthur and a few other soldiers to look into Atalanta's death. Over the course of the investigation, Arthur and Cal will bond a little, since they both have their status as half-breeds in common, but while Arthur is basically happy with how his life turned out, Calderon is a little more wistful of the missed opportunities on the surface world. Black Manta was sent to eliminate Arthur and his team to prevent any loose ends from being discovered, but he actually wants to reunite with his son. When Arthur sees that's what Calderon wants as well, Arthur has a choice: follow Atlantean protocol and order Cal to return to Atlantis with the rest of the team, or allow him to live with his father. He lets Black Manta and Cal go their own way, and Black Manta has cut ties with the people who employed him to take out Arthur, so he and Cal will have to watch their backs. Letting Calderon go will result in Arthur being banished from Atlantis. Orm doesn't want to do this, especially with his mother now dead. Arthur is the last of his family still alive, but rules are rules. Black Manta did tell Arthur that Volko was in league with his bosses, so even though Arthur is banished, there's now justice for his mother's death. Volko refuses to talk about his allies, so Orm and the audience are still in the dark about who did this and what their goals are. The movie ends with Arthur going to find a new life on the surface world. Even though this isn't what he wanted, like Calderon, with his banishment, he will finally be able to connect with his human roots a little, even though he's not really sure what he will do with himself. Next would be a Titan series on the DCEU streaming app or HBO Max or what have you. I know the logistics of trying to do TV shows and movies set in the same universe is nearly impossible, but let's pretend this could happen. This would feature the beginnings of an underground resistance movement that can see the Syndicate is bad news, but isn't too outspoken for fear of getting removed, like they feared that Ultraman did with Lex Luthor. You have Kid Flash, still experimenting with his powers he got at the end of the Flash movie. Cyborg, who got critically injured in the invasion, and his dad was able to build his new body using contraband apocalyptian technology. Raven, we won't get into her origin stuff just yet, but she's got some mystical abilities. Starfire, her dad sold her into slavery to one of the apocalyptian factions, maybe Granny Goodness, as a peace offering. If you protect our planet, you can have our daughter. She escapes, makes her way to Earth, because by now, rumor has spread that it was Earth that was responsible for Darkseid's defeat. If Starfire wants to feel safe from the rest of the Apocalyptians, this is where she wants to be. It's here we find out about the civil war among Darkseid's followers, and the Green Lantern Corps keeping themselves busy all over the galaxy. Each of the early episodes would be devoted to one of the aforementioned characters and their reasons for joining the Resistance. They wouldn't become a team until about halfway into the season, when some big Rogue One-esque heist needs to be done, and they all volunteer for the mission. In each of the origin episodes, our characters encounter the mysterious Mockingbird, who guides them in times of danger, a la Morpheus helping Neo before he joins the Nebuchadnezzar. We find out, along with the members of the team, that Mockingbird is a non-powered Billy Batson, who has a history of working in radio, so it makes sense he would be orchestrating a lot of this and communicating via radio. The Titans discover a clandestine organization within the US government called Hive. Very similar to Hydra infiltrating the government in Winter Soldier? Sure, but DC and Marvel steal from each other all the time, so I see no problem with this. Some of the Hive people we've probably seen before in the Batman vs. Superman movie and in the Suicide Squad movie as some of Waller's allies, but they have a different agenda. Waller wants the superhumans to butt out and let the elected officials do their thing, while Hive wants to work their way up to controlling the elected officials, unseen by the general public. They've been working on this since before Ultraman came on the scene. With more and more superhumans showing up, Hive had to change the focus of their goals so they won't be discovered. Hive was responsible for sending Deathstroke after Owlman, and they were allied with Volko in the hit against Atalanta. The Titans won't be victorious against Hive. In fact, Hive will be just as strong at the end of the season as they were before the Titans discovered them. All the Titans will have accomplished here is finding out what Hive are up to and exposing their own presence to Hive, putting all of them in danger. While they had some semblance of normal lives before they joined the Resistance, now they are fully committed to going underground, as Hive can use all of the resources of the US government against them. The Titans will still be going after Hive in the future, but it's going to be much more difficult than they at first thought. Next would be the Doom Patrol series. I should point out I love what I've seen of Doom Patrol, maybe my favorite superhero TV series of all time, but since I already roped the Titans into this universe, I figured I would have to do the same with the Doom Patrol. The team would already be formed here, much like in the series. They they all live together in some sort of halfway house for freaks where they feel like they're safe from the world. We have the team we had in the series that we got, minus Cyborg, since he's busy in the Titan series. I won't do the thing the series did, where some of them have had powers for 50 years. We will say all of them got their powers and disfigurements in the last 6 months or so. We can do flashbacks, one episode for each character, showing how they got where they are. The big twist here is that Niles Calder is somehow responsible for all of these accidents that resulted in the team getting their powers. The Chief is much worse than any of the team ever suspected. He is part of Hive, and his mission has been to create a team of operatives Hive can use against the rising population of superhumans who pose a threat to their plans. Naturally, the team would be ignorant of the nature of the missions the Chief would be sending them on, and some of the things they can fight during the season might have nothing to do with what Hive wants them to do, but they see themselves as the only ones who can handle a giant dinosaur man, so they will have to fight stuff like that as well. They eventually find out the true nature of the Chief, so they will split off from him, probably go hide in a sentient pocket dimension they recently discovered in one of their adventures until they can figure out what to do about Calder's sinister plans for them. Ideally, I would want to see the characters from the show appear in the movies, since the overall threat of this air quotes phase would overlap between movies and shows. But like I said, it's really tricky to do a TV series set in a movieverse, if attempts by Marvel are any indication. But this is my own fantasy world, so maybe after the Titans and the Doom Patrol get their own seasons, they could show up in the movies later on. And this is already getting kind of long, so we will end this video here. Not as big and epic as Invasion from Apocalypse, but I do have some very vague ideas for a part 3, so look for that video sometime in the future. And I do other videos, so watch those if you love me. Until next time, have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.